Hello researchers, good afternoon everyone. Hope you all have a blissful morning. To make this webinar more connecting, I have introduced FAQs in between so that it would be a more connecting way to understand each other, and I will be able to have more answering to your queries in between as well. So today we are here to discuss about a comprehensive guide to how to write your literature review for your PhD thesis, right? So, as we all know, um, so let's wait for like 1 or 2 minutes for more. Hello, hello, friends. Hi. Um, good afternoon to you too. Let's wait for 1 more minute. Yes, this is a literature review webinar. Okay. So let's start. Let's start a comprehensive guide on how to write literature review for your PhD thesis. Good afternoon, fellows. Um, as we all know, as a researcher, a previous researcher in scientific field is like a spinning wheel. You are reinventing things on your own way, on the basis of other researchers who had already done these kind of things. Let's imagine a pizza. You're making a pizza for yourself, right? Until unless you don't know how to make a pizza from scratch, you don't know what are the ingredients you need for the scratching things, and how to make it from maida, or how to make it from wheat, or how to make it from any other substitute. So you all, in that way you need a proper guidance. So that is what literature review provides to you for your thesis, for your guidance, or for your building a meta building block of thesis, you can say. So in that way, a scientific writing or a scientific building, you can say, is built upon LR, literature review of yours. It is basically providing you context, your supporting theory, and your explanation for your new research, your new findings, your interpretations, right? So therefore, it's basically giving you a whole idea about how to cite your resources and how to make a proper information basic of your for your reader, right? So uh, in that case, this scenario is properly providing you how to make a significant study, right? It's basically explaining you how to evaluate your study for making significance of for your study. It's basically explaining your validity of your study, how much your study is validating for other researchers who are your readers afterwards. So how you are providing the methodology, how you are providing them your analogy, your theory, your predictions, right? So these kind of things literature review provides. And before knowing things, let's understand what are the guidelines of the literature review. So these are the guidelines for your writing when you are writing your literature review. In a good literature review, you have a proper study accordingly. When you do a research, right, so you need a good writers for yourself, as in like a good researchers who had already written a good compiling study or appealing study for your method, for your understanding. So these kind of study you need for literature review. Until unless you don't have a methodology of your own, you don't know what you are going to have, how much similarity you are going to face, how much similarity is going to have, how much you would have a proper predictions of yours. Ki likewise, I am making a corn pizza, right? So you need a corn for that, you need a dough for that, you need yeast for that, you need water, sugar, and each things for these kind of things, some of the things, right? So um, you need a proper methodology how to make it. So some similarity, some predictions, you don't know the process, you don't know the whole process, right? But somewhat key. Likewise, I need a dough, I would make a dough, and I will have a sauce, pizza sauce over it, and I will put the corns over and cheese over. These things, but you don't know how to put it. So these kind of similarities, these kind of discrepancies, or how much your study is relevant to their study. So these kind of ideology of yours and theirs should be matched to proper have a literature summary of your for your output, right? So out of a huge number of publications, you would have a proper I would have a blunder of things, right? You don't know where to find, you don't know where to look for, where to have these kind of predictions, right? So, when you are reading a literature, when you are reading someone's research, go for abstract reading first. Until unless you don't understand the abstract of that thing, abstract is basically a conclusion kind of a thing, or kind of summary of the whole paper, right? So it would give you a proper ideology of what is exactly written in the paper. So you would have idea about somewhat exactly to be drawn out of that study. So next thing is essential research and analysis. When you are reading someone's research, so you need to have what exactly you need, what exactly you don't need. You should be very clear about your output, how you are going to study, how you are going to analyze that study. These kind of things we will be studying further. How you are going to have research gaps out of someone's study, and how you would analyze that into your study. So these kind of things, or these kind of answers to be answered further. So these are the steps that would guide you how to write a proper LR. So the first step is your identify your question. What exactly is your question of research question, right? What exactly are you going to answer in your study? So the next thing is review discipline styles. So after that, when you had a search question, you would have a proper ideology of yours, right? Likewise, I would go I would go to a supermarket to buy these kind of products. You would have a proper list of the items you would be needing to make a dough, making a pizza for yourself, right? So this is basically your analogy, your predictions, right? So the next thing is search the literature. Where to search, how to search, these kind of things to be answered further. But the best where I find my research is on Google Scholar or Google. My most of the literatures to be find out from Google Scholar. Google Scholar has a basically a proper understanding of your analogy. What exactly are you finding? It would give you a clarified picture of your keywords. What exactly are you finding in it? Sometimes when you are finding a literature, you need to be a very sure what exactly are you finding in it. Until unless you don't know your keywords, plan your keywords first. After that, go for literature survey. Don't go uh, don't go for literature survey without knowing your keywords. Likewise, when you are finding a research for like cancer or COVID, currently COVID is the main keyword on Google Scholar or any other Google words. Google. So the next thing you need for that, predictions of what exactly is COVID के अंदर in COVID, uh, what exactly are you finding? Likewise, a protein spike or any kind of protein, any kind of virus related to it, or what kind of virus is COVID is, or how this pandemic had started. These kind of questions to be answer further. Next thing is how you are going to manage your references. When you have a lot of literature review, like 100 of 100 of 1500 of 1500, likewise 150 papers, you need to cite all these papers, right? So have a proper management of how you are going to refer these papers. So next step is critical analyze and evaluation. When you have this much literature, you would have a proper analysis, and you can't write whole their whole reference or their whole paper into your literature review. A literature review to be written basically in like 12,000 to 15,000 words, not more than that in any thesis or so. So how you are going to synthesize that um, literature is basically your sixth step. And when you had left out, likewise, imagine imagine yourself in a situation when you have so much questions and so much answers, and you would be writing those answers in your format. You are writing all these answers to be in your manner, how you understand that theorem. It doesn't mean what likewise when we say x plus y is equal to 5, right? You don't know x, you don't know y, but you know the whole situation, your the answer about it. Its output is 5, right? So the x is your reference or your literature survey, y is your theorem, but you need to answer exactly why it comes out to be 5. So that is your synthesis. And how to write your review is your seventh part, is basically how you are formatting all these theorems, all these terminologies, and all these literatures in proper manner to write a review afterwards. So let's understand what is exactly literature of review. A literature review is basically your academic or a scholar publications, or your scholar analogies, your stores, your dissertations or your books or your conference proceedings and your written materials of other researchers, right? So why do we need a literature review? A literature review gives you an idea, presentation, context of your subjective knowledge to answering your problem in your research area, right? A book of a literature review is basically a summary of your which follows a proper formal styling. How you are answering all these questions to be written in a proper manner, so that other reader who is reading your research could not have a problem reading it. In most of the cases, the author is basically providing a review on previously published papers, right? When you are providing a review is basically how you had reviewed all these researchers which you had, or which you study, which you read, and what is exactly your prediction. That is what basically a review is. When you split up a literature and a review portion, literature is basically proceedings of the other researchers and your analogy or your interpretations into a review. That is basically a literature review, which you will use in your research, right? So what does your literature review is comprised of? Your literature review is basically your overview of the topic and your review goal or your objective. What exactly is your answer, and what exactly is your overview of your analogy or your analysis of the work? How you had likewise take an example of a series of variations when you have a certain point of view which didn't match the point of view from the other person. Like, imagine yourself seeing a picture of a lady. um, Someone see a lady, someone see uh, a plant or a tree behind her, someone would see a shadow over there. Everybody had a different thinking, different perspective of their knowledge. So basically try to have a neutral perspective on the subject, because the other researchers has some other point of view of finding their results. So they would have a different knowledge, they would have a different field, they would have a different background from your study. Imagine you are from mathematic background and you are reading about a biosciences paper, and you don't know certain perspectives or certain ideas about how they had been doing these kind of research. So while reading, you would have like other person don't know what exactly a mathematic problem is, how is writing these kind of things, this theorem is totally incorrect. You can't have these perspectives because the other no, other person is basically from biosciences, right? So that person don't know the facts and analogy of the other researchers. So have try to have a neutral perspective on the subject and try to have a clear vision of yours. Don't mix up with the other researchers or uh, with your predictions. Try to have your interpretations. Don't copy paste or don't have a strict vision about certain topics or point of view of others. And the next thing is similarity and differences between the works are to be clarified. What exactly is your finding, and what exactly is the similarity between your findings and their findings? So these things to be written very clarifiedly or very clearly, so that other person or other reader can able to understand what exactly are you writing about. So try to have a proper or a clear vision about what exactly is your writing perspective. when you do when you do your literature survey, try to have a proper analogy behind things. What exactly is their finding and what exactly is your finding in it? Otherwise, you would have a mixed up scenario, mixed up interpretations of yours. Because sometimes we see somebody who can't influence ourselves from other studies, because their study is basically their predictions. You can't have their predictions because you don't have their vision, right? So try to have a proper or a different attire of your vision. If you are copy pasting somebody's theorem or somebody's idea. So try to have a paraphrasing things, or try to have a proper, what do we call it, a proper manner of converting that theorem or that ideology into your terms or your perspective. Until unless you don't know these kind of things, so that would be a major difference. So the next portion is, when you are comparing a writer's or a researcher's point of view, so have a proper or a different scenario or different agenda of your measuring scale, and because you don't know what exactly their vision was, so try to have a proper uh, comparison manners of yours, or comparison attitude of yours, or weighing balance of yours is totally different. So try to have these kind of perspectives of yours, of your own. The research how you are approaching that question is totally different from theirs. So try to have a proper exact vision of exactly how you are going to answer these questions over your image, so that a person who is reading would not think of that person is a copycat or something. So try to have a proper age vision of yours, your own. So how to find a gap in a study which exactly had been investigated already, or what exactly is your their missing point or their void investigation, which you would be further you would be investigating in your research, can be possible sometimes. Sometimes the researchers say I had used 10 samples or 15 samples, but you can do with a good result can be predicted after 50. So that kind of scenario would be helpful for you, because that person already had told you कि that 10 or 15 results would not give you a proper a good answer. So that the assessment of how analysis is relating to is the main statement. When researchers saying like 10 to 15 samples are not correct way of doing this research, you do it like for 50, the other person you of which who is reading your research would say, um, likewise in your research you would say 50 samples are not enough. The other reader or the other researcher who is going to do this research would investigate your study कि 10 to 15 samples were already not enough, 50 samples were all 50 samples will not be enough, so I should use 100 samples. So your study is benefiting other researchers as well. So try to have a proper that's why I called, that's why I was calling that, to have a proper analogy or proper predictions of yours would help others or your readers to investigate further, because you need to spin the wheels properly. So these kind of things to be properly attained in a good manner, so that other researcher would not face the problems you would be facing in your research. So this is basically a literature review. The literature's review concludes with the summary. When you are ending your research, or when you are ending concluding all these perspective, all the other researchers work, so have a summary output of yours, and try to write it in like 400 to 500 words, so that it would be a clear vision of exactly what you had concluded among all these 100 papers you had been reading from like 2 to 3 months. So these things to be have a proper image. How, what exactly is your literature review, what exactly it would be seeing. So literature review is basically an appearance of exactly a bigger, our review of literature says that appears this appears to be bigger than in the past. When you are seeing the girl sitting over the table, when she is reading the books, the first thing is she's reading a simple a book. but you don't know what exactly the bigger picture was, how much she's been reading from the past, how much she's been having so much knowledge about that particular thing. So these kind of things to be understand from your literature. So try to have a proper analogy and try to have a proper predictions of your study. So, what exactly the number one point is how you are citing that paper, how you are going to have a proper formatting of that paper. That is very important. If you are not reviewing or you are not using a proper format, the dissertation or your thesis or a publication would be majorly affected, because when you are not giving any credit to the other researchers, why would you think the other researcher would give credit to you? So think about the future as well on the same time. And the main thing would be how a proper formatting would give you grooming style, how much you are grooming your literature. A groom thing would be a helpful thing, so that it would be a proper understanding of exactly where to find a, when you have a systematic format, you know how to that this first portion is abstract, second portion is your introduction or your keywords, after following keywords and an introduction, and then you would have a proper literature review, then you would have a summary of literature review. These kind of formatting would help you in understanding um, of literature. Sorry. Yeah, hi. So somebody is asking me to go previous study. So yes. So in this, I was saying about the gap of the study and how you are going to investigate the void in that situation or their study. So these things to be understand in proper manner, how you are analyzing their study and how much they had explained about their mistake. These kind of things is the gap of the study which you need to be investigated in your study. If you want to do the same study, you need to know what exactly the mistake of the researcher had been done in the previous past, so that you won't repeat the same mistake. So this is basically a gap in the study and how you are going to investigate that study. So I was saying about a proper formatting. A proper formatting will be helping you in the formatting or the styling, or how to include your format, how to have the margins and spacing, the body texting, how you are writing about the body text. Every journal or every um, in university or UGC and other university have a proper guidelines about how to have these kind of scenarios into including in your study, how much how to write an abstract. They had a proper formatting about how to write your abstract as well. So try to have these things in your formatting. So APA formatting is basically your author name, surname, initials. Okay. After that, the year of the publication, article of the title, article title. Next thing is the basically your journal title, caps lock, capitalize every word, the volume number, issue number, the page range, the DOI is basically digital object identifier. When you write this only, you would be finding this paper. You don't need to write the author name or everything. You just need a DOI in the research or the in URL, and you would be directed to this journal only. So this is your DOI or your digital object identifier. How to make a decision on a topic. If you are relevant, if you are doing a relevant study, so you need to have a similar, you would need to have a similar kind of reading, obviously. Until unless you don't read a, sorry for the connection. So where I was explaining about how to make a decision on the topic. When you have a relevant study, or when you have a relevant chosen subject, you need to have a proper similar study. Likewise, imagine you are studying about breast cancer only, or you are studying about lung cancer. So, how you are going to analyze that study? You would be finding similarities about what exactly is lung cancer, and you would be only needing a study on lung cancer. You don't need any other cancer about it. So, you need to have a proper imagination and your relevance of the study. Until unless you don't have a relevant study to write about or to read about, you can't write literature review, right? Because there is no background. So there would how you would be having your thoughts or your process going without numb things. So you need to have a proper imagination about your imagination and the imagination of the previous researcher who had already done or gone through the same situation which you are going through right now. So these things to be written. When it comes to writing or updating thesis, choose a subject that is crucial. This is very important. When you are updating your thesis, when you are writing your thesis, you need to have a proper crucial subject to write upon, because a crucial subject would indicate something or would have a proper significance about something. Choosing a subject is basically you are making a difference in something. How you are making a relevance uh, change in the community when you are not doing a proper research on something. So you try to have a crucial subject topic, and try to have a to change, because you are doing a research for what you are doing a research for changing the mind, or you are changing the guidance about the mindset of the other researchers about your thinking with your thinking, right? So these kind of things to be written very effectively. Subject should not be too general or too specific. When you are writing a subject, likewise, lung cancer is a part of cancer or is a type of cancer, this is already we know. So you don't need to have so much general information. You can't just choose a topic. Likewise, you need to be specific. Likewise, lung cancer has these kind of receptors, or these kind of um, um, these this kind of enzymes, or these kind of um, nodes, or these kind of systematic things to be done, or these kind of chemotherapies. You need to be very specific about what exactly is your subjective knowledge you are explaining, and you would have a proper guidance about these. So, when you are accepting a proper subject topic, try to have a narrow topic. You can't have you don't try to have a very narrow topic, because a narrow topic would give you a proper chin up. Until unless you don't have a proper claim or the backup for the option or for your research, so that study would be irrelevant at some point. So try not to have a very broad topic, because it would make you difficult to study. So that, because it's so much of the work, you can't write all the work, all the conclusions in the world to be written about. So try to have a narrow topic, because a narrow topic would give you some point of guidance, of some point of enough research, so that you would have a proper guidance about what exactly are you writing about. So the students at university tend to choose subjects that are related to their fields or study your final thesis projects. So try when you are doing your thesis. So you student because uh, you need to complete your thesis. You need to have a 1 year of that. So try to have a relation or a relevant study so that it would complete an year, so that you could have a final thesis in your hand to write about. For PhDs, generally, my PhD took like 6 years. My topic was very narrow, but there was very little study about that topic. So it took me so much years. I have very At first I was so much depressed about what exactly I was going to do, and what exactly in the pressure, the mindset of minds is not matching with the guide of mine that is very mandatory to be had in a same parallel manner, because the researchers or your guide is the main person who would guide you enough so that you would have a proper thesis in your hand at last, because you only need your thesis um, and subjective things in your hand, so that you had a complete or confirmed degree in your hands, right? When I was doing my things, my PhD, I was so much depressed about how much I was in a year where my guidance was my guide was so much in trouble. She was like, I would not be able to continue with my university skills. She was there for me only for that year. So the relevance of the guide is very important, and how she's connecting and helping you at the same point is basically had give you the final thesis or final project in your hand. So this is very important. How to select your topic or how to select your literature. When I was doing my research, so at that time the published material, the databases which I was selecting was very crucial at that time as well, and at this time as well. So try to have an online databases, or likewise Google Scholar is the best database for the publications, or for the books, or for PDF files, or PDF journals, conference papers, and the content quality is very good. So try to use Google Scholar for your database collection. And if you're a student in a university, try to have a resourceful teacher, or a resourceful literature library, so that where you can have proper access to the university resources. When I was doing my research, I spent approximately 6 to 7 hours in library, and tried to finding and reading research papers, thesis of some old fellows, and my guide was the main person who told me to study in library for like 6 hours or so, make your points and make your analogy, make your interpretations about how I predict these things on my own. She has a proper motivation to boost me up. Likewise, on the same time, she was giving me guidance on how to summarize somebody's literature into my own words. I used to like 200 or 300 words a day about what exactly did I find out from that publications, and how that publication is helping me in that manner, and how that predictions of their of other researchers was so much contributing to my study or my research. So these kind of things to be written in your selection process. sometimes when you are doing your literature, if you are not doing your literature on your own, you will need to identify important databases in your field of research. When you are doing your own research, okay, then you would have a proper guidance of how important that research is, and databases when you are doing research on the basis of only online or on your laptop. So you need to have a proper guidance of how you would have a proper predictions of or that important databases. When you are reading a paper, you need to understand what exactly the paper is about, what exactly the paper is saying, what exactly the paper is basically predicting, what exactly that paper is giving an ideology, and what impression is giving it to you. So this is basically identifying your important databases. When you are doing some academic researches or academic information, so try to have academic research engine like Google Scholar. It would provide you a proper academic information, and to find out scholar content, what other researchers had been doing these years, or you can filter out that research as well. So where to find that research from which year, so that kind of things. Somebody's asking me how to use Google Scholar. Let's have a vision about it. So here is here it is, Google Scholar. So here is Google Scholar. So write about likewise COVID, and this is the paper. You can custom the range from which range you need. Likewise, I need paper from like 2010 to 2020. So this is my custom range. So this is basically your you can relevant it by date, sort by date as well, and abstract basis as well. On everything basis, you need to have you need everything in it. So likewise, you can have these analogies, and I did advanced search by adding COVID as well as the protein, and as well as the protein name, what exactly I would be doing. So these things to be taken as an encounter, so that you would be having a proper attendee and you finding your research. So so when you are providing a digital printing or digital resourcing in your specification of the subject, you need to have a proper linking of that study as well. When you are doing that, when you are writing somebody's research, so now you try to have a proper linking to that study, or what exactly that study had given you ideology. So during the research process, you need to discover that the subject is too wide or too narrow. Try to have a narrow topic. I told you earlier, too wide or too broad subject would not do anything, but would implicate or complicate things further. Um, Imagine yourself having four or three threads passing a needle, and passing through a small pen, a small needle, right? So a single thread would pass easily rather than two or three threads. So this is like a research process is like pinning yourself, or um, thinking in a small, very straightforward way of selecting your topics. So try to have a very narrow topic, and when you are refining that subject, ensure that you are doing sufficient study or sufficient relevance to the study. You are matching things, you are imaginating, or you are interpreting the right study, so that it would be having a proper building block to your thesis. When you are formulating a thesis or agenda, you have a you need to have a proper imagination or your interpretation to have a proper agenda of yours. You can't take somebody's agenda into your agenda. Try to have a proper imaginations of yours only. So this has already been told how to do that study. So I skipped that part. How to COVID situation, yeah, I had already been explaining about. So this is a small video of how to read and how to predict it. So next thing is, sorry about this. Um, yeah. So let's understand what exactly is a research gap in literature review. Literature review is basically, literature gap is nothing but the void in somebody's research which you would be further investigating. So let's understand what the research gap is. Research gap is basically the missing piece or the fragment that has been that needs to be explored further, which is like to be explored, but they don't have the further resources or the fundings to explore these. So this is also a void size when a population or a sample that person has used that is also some research gap. Size, type, location, somebody is using, somebody had been restricted to a certain location, likewise Asia or Punjab, or likewise India or Delhi, or these kind of population or the locations that person was restricted to. But you have so much funding, you can explore more states as well. So that is also a very important point. A research process or data collection, how that person is collecting the data and from where that person is collecting the data, is also a major point. So these kind of points will help you further for implying on your research idea. So moving on, how can you figure out where the gaps are? So the next point is how to find a gap. The first move is to perform a comprehensive literature review. When you go thorough reading, don't try to read a paper like 4 to 5 times, because a paper which a person has written or a researcher has written his whole paper in like 2 or 3 years of that study. So that person, that study you can't understand in like a first go. So try to have a proper reading of that paper for like 5 or 4 times. I generally read papers 2 or 3 times myself. Like now, if I am reading a paper, I don't understand it properly, I try to go thoroughly or briefly and like 2 to 3 times. So try to have that ideology. And to find these holes, you need to read critically and through the scope of the literature, as look for the journal papers. So good journal papers will give you a proper and inclusively exclusive idea about how that person has been reading that paper, or how that person has done that study, and what exactly the future implications of that study, and what exactly that future predictions that can be done for further investigations. That things to be that also need had been mentioned in some kind of papers. Your aim should be to find out a room or an opening for new research contributions. When somebody is giving you the research of theirs, when you are reading that person's research, you need to have a proper imagination. That person was in so much hurry, or that person was so much built up or compiled up or in a restricted form, that person was not able to do proper research contribution. So that how you are going to give it a new ideology of your own. So that is basically a new way of finding a research exploration. Try to gather so much information about that topic of yours, so that you would have a proper or a non-biased kind of readings of that research reading of yours. When you are doing or looking for the subject, try to have a qualitative, quantitative, and a mixed method approach. Don't go for like subjective imaginations of yours. Try to be qualitative for the sub research findings, quantitative for the methodology or the population size, and the mixed method is basically compiling of qualitative, quantitative, subjective, and vice versa. For all these to be compiled together is a mixed approach. So try to have, I generally try to have mixed method approach, because sometimes qualitative approach is basically not providing me such informative knowledge. So I generally go for mixed method approach. And quantitative approach is like, that is giving me quantity of the subjectives, but there, that is not basically providing me a papers or research for so much constructive way of doing my whole study over that study only. So try to have a mixed approach, because a qualitative and a quantitative both can is mandatory in the subject of research writing or in a research literature survey as well. So try to have a proper variations in the study, so that terms or limitations of the abstract papers using search technique known as nesting. When you are reading so much at ideology, or you are searching so much reviews or searching so much research, you need to have a proper nesting method of yours. Because when you are reading abstract reading is a very constructive or a subjective manner. uh, so you need to have a proper approach of yours to read an abstract. I generally read my abstract from methodology. When I find an attractive methodology, I try to have a proper reading or go through for once to read whole paper. And I write about what exactly did I find about it, and what exactly would I need for the new implications of my contributions to that study. So that is very important to be written. And where can you look for the research gaps? You will want to read a critical collection. When you have so much of the research, you need to have a proper implications of how you would be reading that paper, right? So when you are going through whole paper, you need to find words like, they have, I from that approach I find out this. So what exactly did they find out, and how that person is going to investigate that study as well. These kind of terms to be find out first. And for the use of papers, discussions is the main area to find where the research, where the person has written that about their research, and how that person is basically implying how the discovery or the research has been done, and they predicted the research, and what exactly are the suggesting for future or additional research topics. So try to find in discussion sections. For example, the example of the relationship between the four damping factors: internal friction, support loss, airflow force in fluid space, squeeze force, has not been clarified. So that person is clarifying that research, or the relationship that he was finding is not sufficient or not clarifying the image. So it is obvious that one is dominating over in actual microsystem. So he is actually implying that out of these four, try to have one predictions or one source, so that you would have a clarified vision of exactly what the relationship is, or try to have a similarity fraction of what exactly one thing is overpowering over the three. So these kind of ideology can be used for further research. So this is basically a good example for the research gap. When how can you fill out the gaps? Some phrases you can use to indicate your gap fill is basically, we there for analyzing this research for further investigation. In the study we investigated this, and afterwards that implications can be done in further manner. Therefore the goal of the study are, so these kind of terms as well to be used for further how you are writing your research gaps. In this paper, we report this analogy, that subject of yours, and afterwards how you are it predicting and how you are giving it importance. So the next step is analyzing and preparing for the literature. Offer a quick summary or executive summary is a proper way of writing a literature review. I used a executive summary of about a constructive summary of all the literature I had been using, and the best chosen summary, and what exactly I am going to do in my methodology section is basically I used to write about. So try to use a proper portion when you are think about doing a filtration section. When you are using a whole proper assumptions of other person or other researcher study, that person is so much implicating and about focusing on such certain perspective of his. So you are exactly filtering out all that study, all that perceptions, all the interpretations by skimming them, by giving him a filtration of your own. You are just finding out the whole one thing or one subject out of the whole scenarios. So that is skimming of the filtration. Skimming is basically the filtration of the whole. um, Likewise, a malai of the milk is basically a skimming portion, skimming kind of, you are filtering out the whole abundance of the sources for the nutrition, and you are basically having a combination of whole study. So this move should include reading the abstract first, few paragraphs of the introduction at the next section. So this is basically how you are going to analyze that, and for the preparation for your literature review. So try to read first introduction or abstract first, then have a good time noting what exactly that person was writing about, what exactly had he written, and try to make notes out of it. Try to organize your material, consider headings or subheadings for your literature review, and try to make it so much understanding that that first section is connecting to second section is connecting to third, and so on. How you are going to analyze, and preparation of your to be continued. When you are taking notes, keep these things in mind. Define your important concepts, define the ideology of yours, what exactly are you explaining about the subjective knowledge of the portion of your research, and look for the numbers. what exactly what exactly that person was saying about imagination of the research you are compiling, or contribution of that researchers to be made out in a proper manner, in a proper formatting. Recognize their main trends. So don't go for like a old publications or a old research, because that is irrelevant at some point, because we are in a trending age, right? So the fashion changes in like a day or two, in a month or so. There is winter, summers, and then it's some spring season. So for every season, you have a very variation of clothes, right? So there, say in same manner, you need to recognize the new trends which are being passing on for like last month was this month was this, next month would be this. So try to have a proper managing, or try to have a proper trending way of your ideology. Examine the focus and ability and the weaknesses of that research, and try to write in your manner and your abilities and your ideology, so that it would be a proper focus up. Examine the literature review for any holes or any gaps in it, and determine the connection between the study and the similarity between the study of yours and theirs. Imagine the examine the method they have used and how you are implementing that in your research, or what exactly are you changing, and in that are you mixing the two literature summaries, or literature um two literature methods that can also be possible. Somebody had been using the DNA extraction from one thing, but the ideology or the result that he is not getting afterwards, the another person is getting. So that is basically, you are basically mixing up the two methods, but getting a high number of large number of DNAs. So that is basically a new imagination or a new contribution of yours. How to analyze or how to prepare literature review is basically, you would be understanding in this section. To begin with, try to summarize the literature into your own words. Don't try to copy paste or try to, because plagiarism is basically a crime. You can say, sorry for the network interruption. So as I was saying about how to analyze and prepare for the literature review. When you are summarizing the literature while writing the review, start start using the executive summary which you had made earlier, and try to analyze all the aspects in that point of view. Until unless you don't understand the perspective of the other researchers or the other scientists who has been writing the literature from for the very several point of, so try to have a very simpler and a very conceptual way of understanding that research, some other researchers work. And next thing is the main important thing: analyze and explain the summary you had concluded in from the various tables and everything. Try to make it in a formative way of a table formulation or a figure formulation to analyze or to explain what you had learned from that researcher, what you had been learning from that researcher. Example of taking like a table of like and proteins, and the table of the references which that enzyme they are producing, and the next thing is the referencing, and the next thing is the pathway that protein is been following. So these kind of modulation would be even able to understand the other reader, to explain what exactly had you been concluded and what you had understand from that kind of study. So try to have this summarization as possible, if possible. The next thing is, try to do your proceedings or your writing methodology in a more trendy way, like using Microsoft, not writing on a paper or a pen with the pen. Try to use in an online or trending way. Use Microsoft softwares, Excel, and spreadsheets, etc. Like, so for referencing, you can use EndNote, RefSec, Bytex, many other softwares. I will be explaining all these afterwards. So the next thing is the date, author, method used, these kind of things to be included in like a table formulation, so that it would be easier for you as well, for the reader as well, to understand what exactly you are saying in that kind of perspective of your own way. So try to conclude it in a table formulation. So next thing is how to create an audit, how to create a proper research formulation. So the first thing is to determine your problem of the thesis, your what exactly are you going to explain in your thesis formulation. Likewise, I was taking an example of making a pizza. There is a very different kind of variations of pizzas in the whole world. Italian way, or like pan based, or Domino's way. Now there is a new modulation by McDonald's, is a burger modulation, burger pizza. So these kind of modulations or the theories they had already explored, and they are making their own ideas about it. So this is what their literature, and the new idea of yours would be likewise explaining, making a new pizza out of like tacos or something like that. This is your ideology. You would be making these scenarios out of researching from all these aspects, all these theorems, and you would be having a new analysis of that theorem, and you can a new pizza formulation. So that is what exactly a research is, or a researcher would do with the research from the past. So describing why this research is so much relevant to you and for the other author or other researchers which they had been doing all these research. So the next thing is why, explain why you choose the research. Ex- do explain these kind of theorems, or do you explain why you have been choosing this kind of theorem or the research. And literature you did over other content, why this research is so much implementing, and how it would be impacting the world out of, why your theorem or why your theory is so much important, and how it's implicating, and what kind of changes it would make in further advancement of the technology. So these things to be explained in a further perspective way of yours, and making a clear analysis of the things, like what exactly the research problem is explaining or describing, uh, of your point of vision. So next thing is, while talking about the literature review, this have to be written on the subject. Don't overpress, or don't go out of your tracks. Be on your tracks so that it would be easier for. It would not be a like of a, what do we call it? A compulsion of a different objects. You can't compile all these objects in one thing. So be subjective, be on a narrow path, and try to analyze and explain all these mandatory suspects, or analysis of your aspects in one modulation. Don't go for like 1 to 3 modulations. And it would just generate a complications, or would create so much confusion in your mind, that you would not able to understand where to go and which path is the correct path for me for the research or further research. Because the methodology is a complicated path afterwards. When your literature part is so much confused or so much influencing, you would not be able to clear your mind afterwards while reaching to the research period, because you are just analyzing the research work, right? On literature review, afterwards you would be doing the experiments. That would be confusing, which experiment was good. You can't just overrun 3 to 4 experiments in one go. So you need to understand these kind of perspectives. So try to have a narrow path, and just be on the very subject or the problem solving attitude of yours, with one subject, one problem, your one goal. Don't go for so many goals. Don't go for a very broad spectrum of things. Just be narrow in your vision. So explain how research gaps is filling all the holes of the, when you are explaining about the research gaps. So try to analyze all the aspects, all the gaps which had been audited or in the previous studies, so that it would be easier for you to understand what exactly you need to do, and which path you would be following up, and which gap is you fulfilling and afterward of your studies. So try to have a proper constructive way of formulations of your analysis, and be certain. Don't go or don't complicate or don't mix up the scenarios, don't mix up your references. Just go in a very very steady way, so that it would be easier for you in afterwards, because thesis writing is like a very complicated process in somewhat. It took like 2 to 3 years. My thesis took like 2 years for me, when I was writing each and every day of my writing in a very formulative way. I used to write my whole project in like, I had a notebook of my own for the research work and for the literature work. When I which I was doing in library, I used to write each and every aspect of the abstract I was reading and what I had included afterwards. So these kind of points to be made, so that you would have a roadmap for yourself afterwards in your writing process. Because afterwards, when you would be writing, you can't just go and have all the knowledge of the things which you were reading from the past, because it would be very complicated afterwards. Obviously you don't know. When I read a book like today, I can't remember each and every word of it in like a month or so. So when you read a book, when you read a paper, try to make your own points on the same point, on the same variety of the time, because afterwards, when you analyze all these points, it would be easier to recall all these things which you had already like a month ago. So try to be a very sightful way of your resourcing. So that would be my point of view. uh, be a well organized and comprehensive essay, and try to use subheadings as possible, because it would make fancy, right? It would make things fancy, and it would make people understand what exactly are you able to explaining in that perspective, in that scenario. Try to conclude and at the end of the study, because after making a meal, after making the whole big picture, you would have to implicate it to you, do you and you need to show it to the world, right? So try to make a conclusion very brief, so that people would understand what exactly are you saying about it. So our literature is compiled of the summary and the well organization of the subheadings and the headings and the context, and the last part is the conclusion. These three things make our body of the literature. So try to make it like that way only. It would be very organizing way, so that the people, or when they would be reading all your research work, all your thesis work, so they would be understanding what exactly are you going to say about that. And and trust me when I say the tabulations and the map following road is going to help you in your thesis way. The when My guide used to say, when you have a very tabulations and uh, diagrammatic way of representation, so that means you are understanding each and every perspective of uh, that concept, right? So the guide or the external that will come into your thesis reading or your orations or your presentations, so they would be very very impressed, and the writing portion you would surely grant full out of full in your writing. So when it comes to writing positive, try to have uh, there generally there is no hard and fast rules of writing any conclusion part. So but my way of writing is to have a brief summary of what exactly did I said in my um, background, and afterward what exactly I did explained in my whole thesis, whole scenario of the literature review. And the conclusion part is basically what I am going to use in that in my research. So this part would be a very easy conclusion for understanding of the people. It's your own way of writing a conclusion. Everybody has their own way. My way is like to have explain things in like a very formulative way, so that it would be easier for me to understand and for the other person to understand what I am going to say and what I am going to write in that research, and what exactly I'm going in my research. It is a dependent on your goal in evaluating the field of your research, right? The other person who is being evaluation, who is being explaining or evaluating your theory of your research, right? So that person needs to be totally dependent on the thesis you are representing. So the person, while reading that thesis of yours, should straightforward say this thesis is about this thing. So these things to be um, taken care of in further analysis of yours. So the conclusion is basically your rep of thesis, hypothesis, and support allegations. What exactly is your introduction of the topic, and simply criticizing the theory with the promotion of the further your research would be. So this I was saying about in my scenario. This is my way of writing. How to stop, how to make no mistakes. This is the main perspective, or this is the main point of saying things. When you are making a mistake, you tend to have make mistakes more than once or twice or thrice. You don't just go with the one mistake. So try to have these very less mistakes, because we know there would be some mistakes by our so much pressure, or so much taking step clearly, but still there would be a one or two mistakes in everybody's writing. So try to have no mistakes in your literature writing. So generally, issues in when I am analyzing current thesis or the scenarios of the current students, there are like emotional phrases in it. Likewise, how they are so much attached to their to their thesis. Try not to have that emotional perspective of yours in your thesis writing or your review writing. Because this is making complicated, because nobody is going to be so much emotional about your research, or so much nobody is going to understand how literature review you are so much connected of. Don't go for emotional perspective of that. Always keep in mind how to have a literature necessity, because your idea is you are just painting up things. You are painting things by the knowledge of somebody else, by somebody's vision, but that is your image, right? You're painting that thing, so you need to be very clear about what exactly are you painting, what exactly is your perspective. Don't go with a certain way of scenarios. Likewise, the person who is already written had I have to write the same. There's no hard and fast rule about writing these things, because because when you are not keenly interested in your own study, there is no simple perspective that you would able to understand the other person's research works. So try to have your own implications, your own interpretations. This is my first, and this is I am saying it from the very first slide, that have your own interpretation, have your own advised, have your own perspective of the things to understand or grasp things properly. So try to be on very subjective way of your research. Give personal opinions, but don't include any analysis of the same region for the emotional phrases. So this is very important point of view. Give your personal opinions. There's no problem with that, but don't use emotional phrases. Likewise, that person has used. Likewise, don't indulge, or don't make them look like they had been doing something wrong in that phrases. Just try to be very collective and try to be very supportive to that statement, because that is very important. Because somebody's research is their analysis. Don't too much indulge in that references, but try to analyze that theory. And analysis like is an impartial presentation of ideas and research on the topic. This was I saying in the idea is theirs. There's no doubt of it. But the research or the painting is yours. So try to have your perspectively, and try to use your own colors. Don't use the plagiarism, or don't use the copy paste things on your review writing. There are many issues. Likewise, in structure of the writing, try to have a background definition, if your definition of the segment. This is very often that many people don't write about the definitions, or why the study is so much important. So try to have a pre-literature review section. What exactly are you going to explain about? What exactly is the problem? So try to have that analysis in the first go, so that it would be easier for the reader to understand what exactly is your subjective thought about that problem. It is very important to provide valuable context information, so that a person would understand what exactly the problem is, and why exactly are you doing it. So the main principle is the contact details are not included. So have large potential in audience. So the when you are not able to add so much audience to your reading. So that is very common these days. The next point is weak organization in the structure. When you talk about the common errors or the common structure formulation, the doctor students used to rewrite and and restructure the formulation of the other researchers. Don't try to copy paste the things, because it would make so much less contacts in the version of there's no new version, right? There's an old version that is repeating in the old and all different language, but the same scenario. So try not to copy paste, and try not to rewrite all these things in 1, 2, 3, 4 formulations. So avoid that problem. The use of subheadings will help prevent poor structured literature review, because when you are reading a book or any kind of when there is no breakage in the paragraphs, there is a very lengthy paragraph and you can't read the whole paragraph, right? It would be very boring. So try to have subheadings, so that it would be a continuous way of reading the literature review, because a literature review is basically a history of the literature that has already been done, and what had you concluded out of it. So try to have a constructive way of explaining things in a very smart manner. If this approach and generally there is an student generally approach escape ideologically. They used to have they used to write about the same. They took the whole paragraph or the same whole heading and try to paraphrase it, and try to make a very abnormish way of writing things as it's rewritten, right? That person has already rewriting it. So there is a weak organization about you are not concentrating about the big picture. You are just thinking about completing your thesis. So try to have a bigger picture or the bigger vision, so that it would be easier for the other person to understand what exactly are you going to say in your subjective knowledge. The next thing is the irrelevant content. Likewise, I was saying somebody used to just have a copy paste thing. Somebody just takes from the other study and they don't know what exactly is the linkages or the similarity between that or not. You just copy paste it and just write it in your own language. So that is not relevant, because there is no similarity in the topics. So try not to do these kind of things in your literature review. And the consequences students write about the mentioned subjects, they're meaningless sometimes. When they're talking about the cancer, the next part is they are talking about the liver cancer. There is no such connection of the cancer to the lung cancer to the liver cancer. You can't just connect to one dot to another head hole. Can't just do that because it's a whole messed up kind of a thing. It would be a khichdi kind of thing. Don't try to make these things more complicated as it's already is. So try to have a very simple, very clarification way of writing your literature review. When so the when you are relevant things, there is like total khichdi out of your situation. Try to have a proper relevance to the scenarios where you're writing your similarity aspects. And when you are doing a critical, there is a study is critical to be given subject does not meant to be that to all the specific are significant. When you are generally explaining things about a very subjective manner, so try to have a very specific point of view of yours. Try to be very significant and try to explain the importance of the study. What exactly is that study so much important, and what exactly is that explaining things. So, how do you avoid common blunders in review writing? Generally, there is so much blunders in review writing. I am just not talking about a single scenario. There are so many examples of writing a blender review, literature review. Most of the writers don't think of literature review so much important. They just write, copy paste, and just give it in a one go. So try not to do these kind of mistakes in your literature review. The following suggestions would help you to understand more comprehensive way of writing your literature review. The first thing is choosing your literature to be reviewed. Just understand that your literature is to be reviewed afterwards, not now, but they would be analyzed afterward when you had already done your research, and somebody would say that person's so much mad that he had just copy paste all these things and to just complete her degree or his degree, so that it would not make any implications to the knowledge for the further knowledge, right? Just try to avoid these kind of things. apt just act as a critic to the literature. When you are acting critic to the literature, the chances of getting a better literature is just enhances to like when you are on 5 just and jumps up to like 10, because you are just not analyzing things, you are critiquing them also. Just don't give negative aspects, but just try to have it positively, but try to interpret it the long terms, the long scenarios. Try to have a bigger version of analyzing all these things. When you are writing a literature review, don't read everything. Instead, just pick up the things you want to read. Don't, because I was already saying literature review is a very picky option. Try to have a proper arrangement. Try to have a proper conclusion about the study you want to choose, which you are uh, relying, which you are find any relevance or any similarities to it, and try to have a proper bibliography in your mind. That is basically a roadmap of your literature review. Never offer that reference that isn't full. Summarize or don't quote that also, because sometimes when you are not proving any point or there is no mentioning of things that is useful, so these things to be avoided. So let's understand what the references is. The references is basically you are crediting one second party, first party in your literacy, and you are just giving them reference in your scholarly. So there are five general types of referencing: MLA, APA, Chicago, Vancouver, and Harvard. MLA is Modern Language Association. APA is American Psychological Association. Chicago, Vancouver, and Harvard. Let's understand one by one what exactly are these. Uh, the MLA is basically referencing method that has been established organization, and it consists of a brief in context citation of the body of your essay and lengthy work cites. Is generally, let's understand it here. So here in the surname comes first. The name initials et al. Sorry, the surname, the name initials et al. Et al. Is basically your there are more than one authors, so that we use et al. The title of the page with the inverted commas, the journal name, and the volume number and the year, and the page numbers. So the next is APA. APA is basically American Psychological Association, uses APA form of source documentation. This is the most used format of referencing. This this style is basically so used in social sciences, psychology, anthropology, sociology, education, and other fields. The name, the author initials, the second author, their initial, third author, their initial, and the fourth author and their initials, the brackets, and the year, the title of the paper, the journal name, the volume, uh, the paper volume, and the page number. The next come is Chicago. Chicago way is generally used in author date called author date citations. In this, the referencing style is totally in round brackets or so. The here and the author name, author surname, the author name initials. Here you are using whole name of the author and the inverted brackets, the title and the journal name, and the volume number, and the year, and the page number. The next is the author. Uh, the next is the author date method that is used in many scenarios. It's just generally author date method. Sorry about that. Herein, the author name, the name initials, and the year, the title page, the journal name, the volume number, the page number. The next is the Vancouver. In this, generally, we use, let's take an example afterwards, we will explain. The here and there is no inverted commas, there is no any other commas after surnames as well. So this is a simple way of or name and general idea about the referencing. So here is the author name, surname, the author name, and author initials, the title page, title of the paper, the title of the journal, the year, the date. Here the one major thing is the date, and the volume number, volume, and the page numbers. So, when you are citing the references, try to have a proper constructive way of explaining what exactly the reference means, and try to cite in like proper ideology. That reference is like one. Try not to have any mix match or cross references in between, because sometimes the cross referencing helps a lot, but sometimes it makes things complicated. One and for all, and try to back it up with your own data or your reference, and try to cite all the references you had been taking from other researchers. Write every single author's or by the surname and the author. Try to have generally APA kind of a formatations. So most of the papers or the journals generally have. So try to have a double author references surname and followed by the date publications. And the next thing is referencing software. Bibliotex is a reference management system that allows you to have a listing of this generally is basically latex paper preparation method. EndNote is a basically commercial reference management software. It helps in many bibliographical referencing management. The next is the RefMan is also the same methodology, and it helps in the same referencing formulation. It's a free one, and RefWorks is also the free software. Try to have it. Let's talk about some of the questions. Um, there are three main components in the literature review: the subjective and the body and the context. What does a literature review include? Literature review include is the peer work of the other researchers. How many references? Generally, you try to have hundreds of references because you don't know how much references you would be implicating. The next question would be a research question or study of the literature. What comes first? A literature, a research question comes first. Literature study of the literature comes second. How long does it take to compose a literature review? Generally 2 to 6 months. Mine took 7 months. What are the two types of sources for conducting a literature review? Quantitative and qualitative. Try to have a mixture of both. I used to do both mixed components methods. Thank you for that. I am very obliged by the comments of the persons who have been answering and asking me questions about the other scenarios. Thank you for so much of the support of yours. Thank you so much. Hello. So we will now take about queries. I'm getting so much questions about what exactly to be written, or what exactly to write. So, first query is from Jurair. He's asking about what should a research scholar should write and or how to choose a guide. You can choose a guide by your own. This is your own choice, and if a research guide wants to choose you, it's totally dependent on both of you. But it's best way to choose your guide of your own, so that it would be easier for you and for him. If you have a better understanding between each other, it would be best if you choose each other. So the next question is from Suchitra. She's asking me, how much should I pay for the guide pay to the guide? You don't need to pay to the guide in your PhD. PhD guides are being provided from the university. You need to. I don't think any university is allowing to pay any fee to the research guides. So this is not really valid. So try to try to have those guides who are not asking you for the money. The next question is from Shama. She's asking me for what exactly how can I get a review, right? Yeah. So you can start writing your review with a proper sound and a proper motivation, how you're interpreting your result or your literature. That is the main important soul of your literature review. Don't copy paste it. Just write your analysis, what you had understand from the previous research. So write about that only. And the next question is from Shama as well. So she's also asking me about should we write reviews on each variable separately? Yeah, right. It would be a better way of writing if you use the necessary author names as well as the citations with the links of their reference numbers. and go through what exactly are they saying about, and write your analysis at the end um, of that review. In review of literature chapter included in plagiarism, yes, it's included in plagiarism, and it would be better if you don't copy paste from any other authors. So to make yourself your analysis better, or your LR to be more implicated, so try to have a proper analysis only. Don't copy paste. It would be a crime offense, right? So, how can we write references related to review of literatures? In your literature review section, you are referencing your literature from the previous, right? So, try to have a proper systematic numbering system so that it would be easier for you to understand which reference number is what, and you can directly go from that reference to that reference only. How to manage the timing and data related to chapter of review. uh, the basic answer is try to have a daily routine writing of your analysis. When you go to the library, write what you had read, just write it down. What had you concluded from that literature? Just make some points out of it, and after that, while you were writing, you will be writing. So try to have that notes more comprehensive, so that it would be easier for you to write further. I generally use try to make some guidance about what when I read my abstract or somebody's abstract. I generally note those points of which are mainly important to me, and the publication name, and so that furtherly I would have a proper analysis of what exactly did I read about, and what exactly was there in that review or that publications. How to shortlist paper based on best content. Uh, I'm not able to pronounce your name, Samagri. Your question is how to shortlist paper based on best content as per your requirement in particular domain. Yeah. For shortlisting, you can use a similarity basis. How much similar is that publications to, and how much you want your literature to be similar or publicized, or you can say relevant to that study. So make sure you have some kind of approximately 50% similarity is like um, very good similarity base. So try to have this much similarity in your or in your matlab total reference, total reference, or you can say relevance, is basically very important in writing or shortlisting any kind of articles. How to filter out literature relevant to our topic. When you are literature serving, so try to have a proper relevance, or your pre literature reviewing parameters of how much similarity is there, and how much similarities you are looking for. If you are looking for if you are looking for like 50% of similarity, and how that is your main goal, so the shortlist candidates or your shortlist publications are like 100 plus. If you are filtering out more, so similarity is like 10% or 20%, so that is also dependent upon you. If you are looking for a unique kind of literature, so in that case you are looking for like 1% or 5% of similarity, so that is also relevant. What is the better, integrated literature review or a separate chapter dedicated to? It would be a better way of writing to writing an LR. If you are separating that from separating that as a chapter, write a executive summary at first and a body at the second portion, second step, and the concluded part at last. This would be a better way of writing a proper literature review, and try to have subheadings and headings as well. That would make a proper systematic way of writing LR. Hi Satish. You are saying what are the useful softwares you for PhD thesis writing? The main proper so there is a proper software for you that you can use as LaTeX. LaTeX is basically very relevant. Very relevant kind of article writing software. Otherwise, many of the researchers only use MS. So MS is a very easier tool than compared to LaTeX. So try to have MS, and you can use MS very easily. And there are many other softwares for like referencing, that is EndNote, BibTeX, and RefWork, RefMan. So try to have these references as referencing softwares as well. What is the pattern that we have to follow to organize the information for writing review? The pattern is basically how you are concluding that, how you are understanding, how you are interpreting, how you are analyzing. All these aspects make an LR. So better have a constructive and a complementing way of writing all these researchers' work into your art frame, your analyzing frame. And because it's your picture, right? So it should be made with your heart, with your vision, so that other one who is reading afterwards will understand what exactly you are trying to say in your picture or your reference. So the next is how to manage the time for PhD. I can't spend much time for reading articles. If you are not able to write articles more often, so try to have a proper implementing. There is a software called Google Translator. I used to try it more often right now. I used to copy. I used to write all the paper of I used to copy all the paper and just do it in the Google Translator, and just able to by using listening of that speaking analysis of that software, I am able to just listen to that because I don't have time to read so much papers at one time. So I used to try that software for making me understand what exactly that paper is saying. So you can try that as well for listening, and afterwards you can understand what exactly the paper is saying. If that is relevant, so make it in your shortlist one, or if it's not relevant, make it keep let it out. How to read articles efficiently. Most efficient way is to read abstract first, afterwards read about introduction. What exactly are they saying in their paper is the mostly prominent way of saying in abstract as well. So try to have abstract reading first and then introduction. But I generally use abstract, and afterwards I use jump directly to conclusion. So I don't read introduction at second. I read introduction at third. You can try that as well if you want to. So better way of understanding what exactly the paper had concluded after at last of of their study. How to start writing review or research paper. For writing review and for writing research paper, you should have a proper prominent way or a narrow vision, so that you are only goal oriented to your subject, so that you would have a proper analysis of what exactly are you saying in that paper and your subjective knowledge. Kavita is saying how to identify research gaps. So, the research gaps are basically the voids which they had left in their research. The authors who are already being doing or had done that research had a primitive way of saying that you would have this much analysis after this much hard work. So they have already filled that void for you, and now you have to complete that analysis or complete that sentence. What exactly are they saying? Likewise, that person is saying a glass. I have filled half glass, and you have to fill half glass with somebody else. Likewise, somebody saying I have a glass. I filled it with half 30% alcohol, 40% water, and 20% soda. That would make a proper cocktail. So that way, That way of is your analysis. Somebody's version makes you doesn't make your choices or your vision. So better to have a comprehensive or brief way of saying what exactly are you meaning in it. So that would be a better way of starting things. PhD extension time. Azad, this is totally dependent on the university. How much time a PhD candidate can get is like it totally dependent upon the university or your guide. How much motivation your guide is giving you, that is also important. So make sure your guide is so supporting in your total PhD work process. PhD is a process. I really mean it. Sudhindra is saying how to find a research gap and how to write and publish. So, uh, research gaps are basically the voids I already talked about, and that needs to be filled by your analysis or by the analysis they had given you and some of your potential. So, try to have that in your vision. So, that would be easier for you to understand what exactly they are saying and what exactly are your subject knowledge is. And for writing and publishing is totally dependent upon the journals you want and your university wants. You generally UGC norms are like two conference papers and one publication, so like three papers for your thesis completion. So conference papers are quite easier, but publications totally dependent upon how much you are willing to pay. Some of the journals are very paid, and they ask for like many thousands or dollars in exchange of publications. Try to have a proper Scopus journals and find Scopus is elsewhere software in website elsewhere website in which you can find perfect journals for you according to the field of your subject. So try to filter out that journals out of that, and it's a lot of long work. So Scopus is a very useful tool for PhD candidates like us. Imran is asking how to write research paper. Research paper is basically your study analysis. What exactly had you done in your research work? So that is what exactly research paper is. So it's an implication of your version of short version of your dissertation. So your methodology and results and discussions, these all are to be written in research papers. So next is Rajiv. Rajiv is saying how to identify authentic sources. Yeah, that is what called skimming of the process. Skimming process is basically your filtering out of the best out of 100. That is 1 to 10 can be totally dependent upon the relevance or similarities you are looking for. So better have a proper identification or pre reviewing parameters in front of you. How much similarity you are looking for, how much relevance are you looking for, how much exactly implementations are you looking for, what method are you looking for. These kind of parameters needs to be prefixed so that you would have a constructive way of filtering out things properly. Next question is from Superva. She's asking, is latex efficient or the word software? So totally dependent upon you. What exactly, if you are comfortable with latex, it's totally perfect software. Latex is basically very easy, or you can say one step process in the software. You If you understand the software, this is very easier and a very useful tool. If you don't understand it first, try to use Word as well. Word is also a good software, and it's easier, much easier to from latex. So I still use MS. So that would be a great software if you really ask me. Aman is also asking how to add table or figures. Tables can be added from the insert option in your taskbar. So you can add tables and figures from that. If you want to draw your figures, I use Google drawings, so you can do as well, and that would be a great tool for drawing tools. Or you can also draw figures in PPTs and try to save it in your Word file. If you want to direct draw drawings in your figures in your that would be in your MS file. That would also be great. So next is, what reference style to be followed. I generally prefer APA. So try to have APA because APA is generally used in many softwares and many journals as well. So that would be easier for you for further publications and for public for general writings and everything. So conference papers as well. So try to have that. Thank you so much for listening.